Hey, this is Omari Sankofa, the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press, and I'm joined here by my man Jim. He covers the Milwaukee Bucks for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Jim, how's it going, man?
Man, I'm good. It's good to be in Detroit for a few days.
Yeah.
Get some football, a little hockey.
Yeah.
It's hopping it.
It was a good weekend to come in, right? Good weekend to come in with the
sure.
Lions taking over the city. And we're just here. We're going to recap, I guess, the seasons thus far for the Milwaukee Bucks and the Detroit Pistons as they prepare to play for the second time in 3 days. Tonight, the first game was a pretty back and forth game, actually, for the most part. Pistons stuck with Milwaukee down the stretch. They traded runs. Detroit fell short. Took a huge night for Damian Lillard and Giannis, who had a near triple-double to put him away. Jim, just from that game, what stood out to you about the Pistons, and did they seem like a 4-win team, just given how they performed in that one?
No, not necessarily. And look, the Pistons, the way they play, and with younger players, to be quite honest, Omari, those are teams that the Bucks kind of have a hard time with, regardless of record or perceived talent level.
Right.
Teams that, with younger players who move, who want to play hard for 48 minutes, it's just the Bucks this year have had their issues with those teams, both in half court and transition defense settings. So on one hand, it wasn't a surprise that the Pistons put up that many points. I think maybe what was a little different was the three-point shooting from the bench unit.
Yeah.
These Bucks had not seen Danilo Gallinari, with Mike Muscala, Alec Burks all together.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how that changes, but Jaden Ivey, Bojan Bogdanovic, those starters that the Bucks kind of game plan for look like, there was an emphasis there. Bucks made them work, but then yet here's this other part of this Pistons team that, hey, they got into it, right? And even though those were older guys I just mentioned, I think they still ran the floor. They still played hard. They still put stress on that Bucks defense, which frankly has not been very good this year.
No doubt. The Pistons were definitely feisty in that game. I think we've seen their effort ebb and flow over the course of the year. I think it's been a lot better since they got past that 28-game losing streak, just to get that monkey off of your back.
Right.
Which, a monkey that gets heavier as it piles up, and now you're knocking on history's door. But what really stood out in that game was just that the Pistons, I think they were 20 of 33 from three. Yeah. And, that's like an outlier night for most teams, but especially for the Pistons, who are averaging about 11 makes from three per game, which I think is the second lowest in the NBA. So a huge outlier night there. But also just looking at how many guys really scored the ball well. Tonight they probably just need to push the tempo more and hope threes continue to fall, because you're probably not going to get 20 to fall again.
Right.
So just our teams are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Milwaukee is all in on the championship hunt. The Pistons, of course, they have 4 wins, and they're trying not to be the worst team of all time, essentially, now that we're past the halfway point. Just what has the season been like for you, being able to not only, cover 2 superstars and Dame and Giannis, but just the expectations that come with that and how the team has responded to that so far?
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, you and I have spoken about expectations, and obviously for the Pistons coming into this year was going to be different than Milwaukee's, but it's still expectation, and how do you handle that when things maybe don't go right? And it's funny to say the Bucks are 16 games over 500, top of the East, or one of those teams, but yet it hasn't been the smoothest sail for them. First-year head coach Adrian Griffin kind of had to scrap his almost entire defensive plan a week and a half into the season. Damian Lillard, for as great as he is going through a major adjustment from 11 years in Portland as the primary ball handler, the primary scorer. Everything runs through him to a, albeit Hall of Fame, but still a supporting player to Giannis Antetokounmpo. The ancillary pieces around those guys also have changed, and they're not as good defensively. So they're playing with a different expectation. 16 games over 500 is, on paper, good. But yet they feel that it's not good enough sometimes. And maybe that's the levels, right, where they feel that they should be 20 games over or doing different things. But playing with expectation is difficult, regardless of what end of the spectrum you're on.
No doubt.
The Bucks' talent level, however, at least is allowing them to win games as they figure stuff out.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, of course, the Pistons have been at the bottom, where you have the Milwaukee team at the top. And for Detroit, it's just a lot of things have spiraled this season.
Yeah.
You know, I think you have awkward fitting pieces on the roster. You have a lot of young guys who have not won. You got a lot of veterans who were hurt. You have a new head coach who's adjusting to the roster.
Right.
But even with that, you look at 4 wins, and it's like, you know, all teams have different forms of adversity, but this is a little bit beyond the norm. So the Pistons will have an interesting trade deadline. For the Milwaukee Bucks, are you expecting any moves, or since they already kind of cashed in with Dame, are they just going to see the rest of the season through?
Yeah, it's there's not much to deal. Yeah, that's for sure. I think John Horst is always looking. His big moves, Omari, are always in the offseason.
Yeah.
The in-season moves have been Jay Crowder, Nikola Mirotic. Look, PJ Tucker was a great ad, but I don't. You know, PJ's not like a star, superstar. No offense, PJ, if you see this, but like it's, you know, he knows his role, right?
Yeah.
And like Javon Carter, etc. So I do think he's going to work the edges. We'll just see, though, in a very unique year with cap space or lack thereof, lack of picks, what he can actually make happen.
No doubt. Yeah, the Pistons have been in a unique position where their owner, like a month ago, goes on the record and says, yeah, we need change, clearly. And they were still in the midst of that losing streak at the time. And they made a deal a week ago to bring in Mike Muscala and Danilo Gallinari, who really kind of thrusted the Pistons to shoot and hit 23-pointers against the Bucks, especially Muscala. I think he was 4 of 4 from 3.
Yeah.
And that trade, really, it was for just the additional cap room to get off of the Marvin Bagley contract, and now you have $60 million where maybe you can get 2 impact players. I think that's what they're looking at doing. But just from a roster standpoint, to get 2 more adults in the room, guys who have been in winning situations, winning locker rooms, and can also space the floor, and I think are just much better fits for the roster and for Monty Williams' scheme. We've seen the Pistons play some competitive games. So they were competitive against Washington, although they didn't have their new players at that point. But then they played Minnesota pretty well. You know, Minnesota's been dominant, of course. And then they played Milwaukee pretty well. And it's, you know, like it sounds weird to say this, but last week might have been the Pistons' best week since the first week of the season, when they started off 2-1. And you are seeing some of those signs of growth. So from here, I think the question is, how do you turn this thing around? What can you do before the deadline that can really change the trajectory of this rebuild? Or is it better to even wait and just ride the season out? Because you don't want to set that record. So they have a lot that they're, you know, they have a lot that they're weighing here. Do you want to really sacrifice any assets just to like not set the record, or do you just ride it out at this point? But one way or another, they're going to make some big moves this season. I think the question is just, will it happen now, or will they have to wait till afterward?
Right, exactly. You know, you're right. And honestly, teams like Detroit and the spot they're in might set, you know, have to be the first dominoes to fall. And honestly, Omari, a new league where no teams have cap room, like 8 teams have all the picks. You've got stars who maybe at some point need to be moved from their respective teams because of onerous contracts. So you're right. Detroit could be a sort of a center of NBA basketball, either this February or this summer.
Yeah, especially with the contracts they have that are expiring. You have Bogey, Burks, they've both been good this season. Muscala, Gallinari, I don't think they're going to trade those guys, but they're expiring. And if Muscala keeps shooting like he did Saturday, maybe his value goes up. You could get something. So we will see. But hey, Jim, thanks for joining me, and we'll see what happens tonight.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.